Pro-democracy activist and former Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years in prison under Chinese law. The 78-year-old and outspoken critic of Beijing was convicted in December of foreign collusion and conspiracy to publish seditious articles. Lai was prosecuted under China's national security law, which has been scrutinized internationally for silencing dissent of China's government. Several foreign governments, including Canada, have expressed disappointment in the ruling and the implications it has for independent media worldwide. Given Lai's age, it's possible he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. Joining me now is Jimmy Lai's son, Sebastien Lai, and Irwin Cotler, who is the founder of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights. He's also the lead Canadian international legal counsel for Jimmy Lai. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Sebastien, your father's 78 years old, and 20 years in prison is the sentence. How are you and your family coping with this news?
Obviously we were expecting something like this, but it makes it no less devastating. In 20 years he'll be 100, but given his health, given the conditions he is in, even 10% of that is, it's essentially a life sentence. I don't know if he even has that long. I don't know if he even has 2 years. One thing that's given me a bit of strength, a bittersweet moment, was when the sentence was announced, and my father was stoic, and he even smiled at the judges, almost as an act of defiance, to tell them that they have his body, though they have imprisoned his body, they haven't imprisoned his spirit.
Irwin Cotler, the imprisonment of the body, if not the spirit. What are the implications of Jimmy Lai's sentencing in terms of the use of the national security law in China and what this could mean?
Well, this not only constitutes the criminalization of innocence in its assault on media freedom, on the rule of law and democracy, but it's, virtually a virtually death sentence, for his father. And this followed a Kafkaesque trial where he was denied all fundamental rights to the lawyer of his choice, to consular representation. And we should not forget that this whole criminalization of innocence is a breach of an international treaty, the Sino-UK Declaration. And so this obliges all countries, therefore, to secure his immediate release, not only for his health, but also for the rule of law and for our international responsibilities.
So, Sebastien, on that, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, she reacted to the news with a social media posting today calling it disappointing and calling for the immediate humanitarian release of your father. What is your reaction to Canada's response to this?
We're obviously incredibly grateful. Look, my father has an enormous love for Canada. He has a lot of family there as well. In fact, my grandmother, his mother, lived there for many years. And the more clarity that that the Canadians have shown on my father's case has been incredibly moving. Unanimous consent motions from Parliament and from the Senate. It's obviously very touching. I think everybody sees how wrong this is. Sees how cruel they are to my father, a 78-year-old man who stands for so many of the great values of Canada, of freedom, of rule of law, of democracy, who's given so much in pursuit of these freedoms. And that's why there's so many Canadians MP and so many Canadians are moved by his story. So we obviously welcome it, and obviously we hope that more is done in securing his release.
So, Irwin Cotler, this comes at a time when Canada is re-engaging with China, looking to deepen some of its trade ties. When this started back in August, you wrote in the Globe and Mail that Canada needed to be more vocal in advocating for the release of Jimmy Lai. They had some success with the lowering of the sentence for Robert Schellenberg, the Canadian in custody, from a death sentence to imprisonment. What do you think Canada can get here? Can they have an influence on the Chinese authorities when it comes to Jimmy Lai?
Well, Sebastien mentioned that we're marking really a year to the day almost when both houses of Parliament, condemned what was happening to Jimmy Lai. Just today, the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on International Human Rights unanimously condemned this brutal sentence and called for his immediate release. And I think Canada should lead the community of democracies in a concerted call, not only for his release, but this is something where China has to be held accountable. Again, it is not only the weaponization of the national security law of the last 5 years, but a standing breach of an international treaty, let alone, as Sebastien mentioned, a standing breach of fundamental Canadian values of media freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. A man's life is at stake, a heroic and courageous fighter for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, which Jimmy Lai represents. He's standing up and putting his life on the line for these international and foundational Canadian values. The least that we can do is to take the lead to immediately call for his release and hold China to account for its breaches.
Yeah, but Irwin Cotler, just on that, beyond sort of diplomatic pressure, political pressure, public statements, what can Canada do as a point of leverage here? Because like you saw the trade mission, Canada is trying to hedge against the U.S., by broadening economic ties with China. I don't know if there's a collision there. I mean, but beyond sort of like public-facing pressure, what kind of leverage does Canada have against a giant?
Well,
like
we
China?
have to make it clear that there's no contradiction between seeking trade and securing human rights. That the contradiction would be to secure trade at the expense of human rights, or to secure strategic partnership with China, as has been called, strategic engagement with China, at the expense of all these foundational values. And I think China realizes as well that it is suffering reputational damage from all this. And if it cares about its standing in the international community, then it has to go ahead and respect the universal values that it too has subscribed to in its international treaties. And therefore, we should use all resources available to hold China to account for that purpose.
Sebastien, a final question. My dad is 78, and I'm just thinking about him being taken away for 20 years, and I'm sorry you and your family are going through this. And we've got this situation where China is hailing this as a victory against conspiracy and foreign collusion. What would you like people watching this to know about your father and the work he was doing, and what you hope the response to be to all of this?
I think this, hailing it as a victory is obviously completely insane. This is barefaced cruelty. Like, my father's story is almost something that you see in a movie. If you think of the odds of a child stowaway, a child refugee who arrived into Hong Kong and from communist China, and fell in love with the freedoms of the place and built a very, very successful business. First working as a manual laborer, and then having his own factory, and then founding a clothing brand. And then after Tiananmen Square, after the mass Tiananmen Square massacre, thinking, well, there's more to this, that I need to defend the freedoms that gave me so much. And took this, was willing to sacrifice everything that he's built and go, I'm going to start a newspaper that is not scared to criticize authority. Life's going to be much harder, but it's going to be much more meaningful. And campaign for democracy for the next 30 years. And at the old age of 73, when the national security law passed in 2020, decides, against all advice, to stay and defend these principles that gave him so much as a young child, and defend all these people that campaigned with him. What are the odds? I mean, isn't that a inspirational story? Isn't that a beautiful story? Isn't that a story that that anybody who hears about it thinks, well, I wish I could have done something. Well, we can. My father's still alive. He's still strong. Physically, he's weak, but mentally and spiritually, he's still incredibly strong. And I think if we're talking about warming relationships with China, if Canada's talking about warming relationship with China, how can there be warming relationships if a man like my father, who symbolizes so much of the values that we hold dear, is still imprisoned in Hong Kong? And how hard is it, truly, how hard is it for Hong Kong and China to put my father on a plane and send him back to Canada or to the US or to the UK? It's a very easy thing for them to do. And not only is it the right thing, At this point, it's also the rational thing, because they have destroyed that legal system in order to target him. And freeing him will not repair the legal system, but will be a step in the right direction.
Sebastien Lai, Irwin Cotler, good luck. Thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you both of you. Thank you so much.